Hey everybody, this is Sierra from the Local History and Genealogy Department at the Kenton County Public Library. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to pick up our summer learning series about property records research, and today we're going to do city directory research. So before we get started, I just want to go over the schedule. In June, we did deed research, and that video is available here on our YouTube channel. And then today I'm going to talk about city directories. And then in August, we will end this series by talking about census records. So come back in August for the third part of this video series, or go back and watch June's entry for deed research. Okay, so today we're going to talk about city directories. There are a ton of gems in city directories and a lot of things that I feel like often get overlooked in city directories that can help you with your property research. City directories are great if you're researching not only the history of a residential house, like a house that had families that only lived in it, or if you're also researching like a commercial or government building. So we're going to talk about how directories contain the names of officials and employees that may have worked in a building that you're researching. They often contain the names of schools, government, churches, or fraternal organizations. There's all kinds of names to be found in that section of the city directories. We'll talk about advertisements and what you can find in advertisements. There are ward, streets, and avenue guides. We'll talk about householders directory or the crisscross directory, and then we'll end with abbreviations. All right. So when you go to the front of a directory, usually this is in the front of the directory, there will be a kind of like an index to churches, public buildings, schools, fire departments, police departments, benevolent institutions, charities, fraternal organizations, basically any kind of organization that is in the town usually has a category and it's listed in the front of the directory. These are really helpful if you're researching a property and you may want to know more about the organizations or the businesses or the schools that once were attached to that building or property. So for example, under newspapers, the Covington Herald used to be at 312 and 316 Scott Street, and it was owned by J.W. Wolfe. So you could then add that information to the history of the property you're researching. You could add the name J.W. Wolfe. You could also say that it was once the Covington Herald, and you can build on that as you're researching your property. So keep that in mind when you're looking through these, that you might be able to find the names of the officers or other businesses that were once in your building. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're researching a property, maybe that's changed names. These are also kind of a good way to go in and look, because you have, like, for example, the public buildings and halls. So if something was listed, in an earlier Sanborn map as as the McDonald's building at the southeast corner of 5th and Madison, you could then go in and find that building and have an idea of what it is. So look for those as well. The church directories are always great too, just for genealogical reasons, because you can find the names of the pastors, and also sometimes churches are no longer there. So that's a good way to go through the directories as well, to see if like a property was once a church, but now it's something else. So really take a look at the front of these and look at these city guides and all of the institutions that can be found in them. Advertisements. So this is a really big category in city directories. There are so many wonderful advertisements. This advertisement came out of the 1888 Covington City Directory. It is for the Covington Lager Beer Brewery, and it contains a picture of the brewery. And the office building is still there today. So I put a picture of that from Google Maps here. But obviously that campus is no longer around. And so we get a much better, vibrant picture from the city directory of what that entire brewery property looked like, and how it was interacted with in in 1888. So you can see that, there are lots of horses and wagons, and the smokestacks are coming out because they're brewing beer. So it's kind of fun to see all of these details about a property that maybe some of the buildings are no longer there, or there's still a building there today, and you want to kind of compare how it's changed over time. So make sure you look at the advertisements in city directories, especially because they may contain pictures of your building or the storefront, and it'll give you an idea of what the building looked like over time, especially if you're doing commercial properties. Okay, so a lot of times we don't really take the time to go through and look at the ward, streets, and avenue guides. These are super helpful if you are getting stuck on trying to figure out maybe who's lived in your house over time, or how a business has changed, or maybe the street or the number of the building has changed. So one thing I always say is to look at the street directory, if there is one in a directory, and a lot of times they will make notes about when a street name has changed. So for example, I pulled the 1918 Covington City Directory, and I just looked at one of these, and Oakland Avenue in Latonia was changed to 43rd and Oakdale Avenue. So you can make notes in the directories about when a street, maybe have changed or had a completely different name. In this case, Oakland Avenue is now 43rd. So that's a really big change. So you'll want to make notes of that when you're doing property research, because now you're going to have to go and look for people that are living on Oakland Avenue and not 43rd, and vice versa, depending on where in the timeline you are. The bounds and wards are also really helpful if you're doing property research, because it gives you an outline of where the property is located in a certain ward. And sometimes that will help you with census records, which I will kind of talk more about that in August when we go into census records. But these can be found in the city directories, and these are really helpful if you need to find someone and you just can't find that street in the census. So take a look at the bounds and wards guides, and get to know the neighborhood and what the boundaries of that neighborhood's wards are, and then the houses that are in it. Okay, the householders directory, or crisscross directory, depending on who you're talking to, is also really helpful if you're doing property research, because it basically gives you instead of doing a list by names, it's a list by street, and then it's in order by the numbers on the street, and then it lists everyone at those addresses on that street. So if you're like me, this is really fun, because you can see the Kroger company was at Greenup where Park Place intersects, and it was at 318 Greenup. So you could then look and see who the neighbors were, what other businesses were in the area. Some of these other buildings had apartments, so that's always a really fun thing to discover, because now you know all of these other neighbors lived in this apartment. And then you can basically kind of coordinate your property research based on who's lived there or around them if you get stuck and you can't find a record. It's also kind of fun. I really enjoy that the Arthur here, that's just right behind the library, it listed all of the people that were living in all of the different apartments in this 1936 directory. So you could get an idea of who the neighbors were, especially if you were doing a history on the Arthur. That would be really nice to know all of these names of people that were living there in 1936, because then you could go and do more research on these people and maybe find out more stories about what they did, and how that makeup of that of those different occupations kind of impacted the residents there at the building. So just kind of keep that in mind, that there's all of these wonderful crisscross directories or householders directories and city directories. They are more popular for Covington, as far as Covington directories. In the later years, we also have in our collection here at the library the Haynes crisscross directories. Those start in the, I believe, 1960s. So if you're wanting to just see who lived at a property from 60 onward, that's a good place to start, because you can just look up the property by address and not by name. So these are wonderful things that often get overlooked in the directories that can really be beneficial to doing your genealogy or doing property research. Abbreviations. I get asked questions a lot about what the abbreviations mean in city directories. And I just want to point out that not all city directories have these wonderful abbreviation guides, but a lot of city directories do. And this one came out of the 1936 Covington City Directory. So it says exactly what all of these abbreviations mean. And a lot of them are occupations, but some of them are notations for the location of a building. And some of these I would never have guessed. I mean, LYR is for layer. Like, how would you have known that? So there's some fun ones on here that I had never even, I haven't seen before, but I thought that is what also made them pretty special. PKR is Packer. Let's see here. Oh, here's a fun one. VULC, vulcanizer. So there's a lot of occupations in these city directories that you can find the abbreviations for. This particular city directory also gave you abbreviation for names, which is kind of exciting because a lot of times we know most of these abbreviations, but it's nice to see it written out. Especially like FERD is for Ferdinand. And then AUG is August. So there's some fun abbreviations going on here. But you can always look for an abbreviations guide, and that should help you figure out what the occupation is for the person that's living in the property that you're researching. So take a look at these abbreviations and get to know them and what they mean. There's some occupations here that are just no longer around, so it's kind of fun to do research on those and find out, what that was or what they did for a living. So take a look at the abbreviations if you have a chance. All right, so that is the end of our property records research for city directories today. Thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us here at the library. You can reach us by phone at 859-962-4070, or you can email us at history@kentonlibrary.org, or you can find us online at kentonlibrary.org/genealogy. Also, if you have not yet, you should sign up and do for our summer reading celebration or summer reading club. You can sign up at kentonlibrary.org/SRC. I know that we always think SRC is for children and teens, but it is very much also for adults. There are adult prizes, so there is something for everyone. So I would encourage you to participate and enter in for a chance for some really great prizes. So thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions about researching your property, please feel free to contact us here at the library. Thank you and have a nice day.